Hey girl, you're tuned into the Grace Code podcast. I'm your host Lisa, and this is a show all about unlocking Jesus in the everyday. What's the everyday? Well, it's things like your faith, career, relationships, health, and so much more. I pray that this podcast leaves you inspired and passionate to find Jesus as you go about your everyday and encourages you to step out of your comfort zone and step into the things that God is calling you to. Hey girl, you are tuned into the Grace Code podcast. Yes, we are back for season 2 at long last. Firstly, I am so sorry that this wild ride took a bit of a longer hiatus than was planned. Initially, I had organized to have a month off and just plan the next batch of podcast content to bring out to you, and clearly that did not happen. So there's a bit of a twofold story here as to how this mini break turned into months with no podcast episodes. Now, before I get into it all, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for still being here. Thank you for still supporting me. And thank you for supporting the Grace Code. I know how frustrating it can be when you have expectations and they simply aren't met. You know, it feels like the trust you may have put in me and this podcast stops because, you know, I just stopped showing up here. So it's easy to give up on me. And honestly, I wouldn't blame you if you did. But if you are here and have been here since the beginning and you've stuck by me and the Grace Code, I just want to give you a little shout out and a huge, huge thank you. Now, if you are new here, welcome. I'm excited you're here, and I do pray that you get something out of today's episode. So thank you so much for showing up, for coming expectant, for valuing me and what I have to say, and for inviting me and the Grace Code into your life. From the bottom of my heart, it actually really does mean the world to me. I've always wanted to cultivate a community of women who support each other through thick and thin, and your support towards me has been very encouraging and heartwarming, to say the least. I wish there was a huge, exciting story to share with you today. Initially, I had planned to take December off to celebrate Christmas and, you know, as I said, plan for 2021. I'd updated you guys that, you know, the podcast was going to be hitting the airwaves on Fridays, and was super pumped and excited for everything that I had planned to bring you. Then January hit, and I had let a little bit of discouragement, comparison, and doubt, you know, settle in, and I started to find every excuse I could to not sit in front of the mic and record an episode. And I really did let this build up and take me out of my purpose, which is really funny when I think about it, considering, you know, it's one of my main messages here at the Grace Code, to not let pressure, to not let stress, to not let your circumstances take you out of your purpose. You see, God whispered to me during that time that I was looking at the wrong fruit. I was looking at the fruit of the world and what it produces. You know, it produces comparison and doubt and fear, and not looking at the fruit that the Spirit produces. Unfortunately, sometimes, even though our heart and gaze are fixed on things above, we all still stumble, falter, and fall. And, you know, I'm included in this. I'm not perfect. And I wrote this in one of my recent newsletters as part of the collective, that I actually think our failures are beautiful because it allows the lover of our heart, you know, our King, to truly pour out his adoration and affection on us through his forgiveness, correction, and ultimately his love. And so I came to this point of surrendering it all over to God again and was ready to start re-recording. But there's always a but. What ended up happening was actually a God thing. He blessed me with extra hours at my part-time job. So for those of you that are new here, I don't do the Grace Code full-time. You know, maybe in the future, who knows? But I do currently work and I love it. And initially it was just 1 day a week. So that allowed me to continue studying and working on other outside projects. And now, look, I can't go into too much detail at this time, but there's a pretty exciting testimony that came with these extra days that I was blessed with. Now, that mixed in with the constant lockdowns that I'm in the middle of and the constant reopenings, I had to ease off the Grace Code a little bit just because honestly, my schedule was all over the place. I wasn't working my set days. I was doing stuff late at night. I was doing stuff early in the morning. It was honestly all over the place. So please pray for Melbourne because we are still in lockdown. And we were told we would not be locked down in 2021, but here we are. So, I had to ease off the grace code a little bit. And here we are, quite a few months later with the first episode of season 2. I know there are a lot of new people here, so I just want to take a minute to reintroduce myself and give you a little taste of what you can expect for season 2. So I'm your host, Lisa, and I'm here to help you unlock Jesus in your everyday. I'm married. I have 2 dogs now. So one is a 9-year-old Maltese cross poodle, and her name is Audrey. And the other is a King Charles Cavalier cross poodle. So we call them cavoodles here in Australia, and his name is Kobe, and he's nearly 12 months old. So yes, he is named after the late and great Kobe Bryant, for those of you wondering at home. But please pray for me and this puppy, friends, because he is on a whole other level of hyperactivity puppy. He's very, very cute. There's a few photos on my Insta, and I do add him quite a bit to my stories because he plays it up for the camera and loves it. So yeah, I'll give him that. He is cute, but he's a whole other level of energy, especially at 5 a.m. and 10 p.m. So your prayers would greatly be appreciated for me and this dog, that one of us sleeps at some point of our life. But in all seriousness, my prayer is that by the end of each and every episode of this podcast, you leave inspired and passionate to find Jesus as you go about your everyday, and that you're encouraged and empowered to step out of your comfort zone and step into the things that God is calling you to. So the first episode of the Grace Code podcast hit the airwaves a little over a year ago. I can't believe it's been a year, and God has done so much with my yes. And so I want to encourage you with just how much He can do with your yes as well. I struggled so much with public speaking growing up, and to be honest, standing in front of a room of 20 people still horrifies me. But, it's gotten a little easier over time, like a tiny little bit. It's nothing to write home about. But my point is that God took my yes and used it. I don't want to miss out on what God was calling me to because of fear, anxiety, and my thoughts about my lack of ability. So I just threw my hands up in the air, surrendered to God. I let go of control and let Him do what only He can do. Hebrews 12:2 says, Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith. And knowing this made me all the more confident to step out and do whatever it was that He wanted me to do. He's given me the faith to go and do it and to see it through to its fulfillment. I've got some great guests lined up this season who I think you're going to love. I'm bringing back answering your DMs. So start dropping those questions to me, whether via DM or email. And yes, for those of you that were asking, Ash may or may not make a regular appearance this season. You all loved him in our marriage episode, so I think it's only fitting I bring him back for a few more. But I want your feedback, so make sure you drop me an email or DM me about what you want to see here at the Grace Code podcast. And if you're new, make sure you come and say hello over on Instagram, which is at @gracecode. So here we are, friends, season 2 of the Grace Code podcast. And while you're going to be a part of meaningful conversations, deep heart to hearts, a whole lot of realness, lots of fun, and it's kind of like having coffee with your bestie. So go grab that coffee, that tea, or head outside on your walk, because today we are going to be chatting about finding joy in every season. Look, I don't know about you, but life feels like it's not getting any easier. There is a lot going on in the world around us right now, and even for me personally. And I don't know, but if I focus on the news and its headlines, I end up feeling more fear and anxiety about the world and what the future holds. But God hasn't called us to live in a state of fear and negativity and anxiety. His very word says that he hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but one of joy. And sometimes I think we need to search for that joy, or even just choose that joy when everything else around us is shouting, no, choose this fear. Oh, no, choose hurt. Hey, choose unforgiveness, or even choose anger in that situation. So we need to stop and go, hang on, what's one good thing that can come from this situation I'm in right now? Romans 8:28 says, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Friend, you love him. You wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't. And so the scripture is telling us that because you love him, you have been called according to his purpose. So he has a purpose for you. So this circumstance or this season that you are in right now is just one of those things that he is working in the midst of and turning it around for your good. There's two types of joy that we walk in. There's the circumstantial, fleeting joy that you get, but that's actually not joy. It's in fact happiness. And, it comes and goes depending on what is happening in our lives at a specific time. And then there's the eternal joy that is found in Jesus, that is with us no matter what we're walking through. And having moments of fleeting joy, it's absolutely fine. It's not a bad thing. We all have really amazing things going on in our lives at times, and we feel happy. However, the key is never losing our hope in our eternal joy. There's this term being thrown around lately, toxic positivity, and it stems from this idea that constantly finding the positive in everything silences the negative emotions that we experience. And this makes people feel pressured to pretend to be happy, even when they are struggling and their world feels like it's crumbling around them. Now, I find this term really interesting because how I see it, it's that choosing joy isn't ignoring the hard moments. It's not about plastering, a fake smile on your face and wearing a mask and pretending that everything is perfect in your life. It's about recognizing these messy moments that you're walking through, acknowledging those negative feelings and saying to God, hey, I don't understand what's going on right now. I'm feeling pretty gross about it, but you are still good. And so I will continue to choose joy no matter what the natural circumstances around me look like. It's saying, hey, I'm not going to let this hard moment that I'm walking through or these difficult seasons define me, define the way I think, and define the way I will walk out this season that I'm in. No matter the season you're in, hints of the next one are scattered throughout it if you look for them. Everything may look the same, but transformation is happening with every step you take in and out of that season that you're walking through. I like to think of the seasons that we are in and that we go through, in fact, season us. We learn to navigate them. We develop character and perseverance. And, we do this by wholly trusting in God. And while every season doesn't guarantee happiness, each has its joys. Joy isn't an emotion that you feel. It's found deep within each of us. Sometimes you can't see it, often you can't sense it, but know it's there. And I've walked through a really hard season these past few months, and there were days when there was nothing to be happy about. Like, it was a struggle, but I had to continually search my heart and choose joy and choose to dig deep. And slowly I was able to get my head above the situation and look at it from God's perspective. So rather than look at it like it was a huge hill I had to climb, I was able to look down at it and figure out the safest and best way to get to the bottom of it without stumbling and tumbling over all the obstacles that were being thrown my way as I navigated through this season. And more often than not, the only way to unlock joy is by hiding in the secret place with God and digging deep and battling for it in worship, in prayer, and in His word until that season changes and you feel that transformation come. And until it does, because it will change, there's only one choice you need to make. And today That's to choose joy. So friend, I'm choosing joy today. Will you? You know, this episode is just a short and sweet taste of what will be happening here every Friday. So thank you so much for listening and inviting me into your life. You know, I'm really excited for what God is going to do with the Grace Code, and I hope you are too. Now, for those of you who don't know, I've recently updated a few things and I'm very excited to share them with you. So I have a new website, which is thegracecode.co, and I just launched my blog and added an online store. So make sure you go and check all of that out and let me know what you think. Finally, don't forget to encourage someone this week by sharing this episode with a friend, and come and connect with me over on my socials at @gracecode or via the collective, which will be hitting your inboxes this afternoon and every Friday after that. So until next week, friends, have a beautifully blessed week. Thanks so much for joining us this week on the Grace Code podcast. This show is made possible because of listeners like you. If you want to find out more about the Grace Code, head over to our Instagram at @gracecode and say hello. If you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss an episode, and be sure to tune in next Wednesday when we drop our next show. Until then, have a beautifully blessed week.